What is up, Cokesbury? We are so glad that you're tuning in with us online. Wherever you're watching, whenever you're watching, we're just glad that you are here. Hey, we are the last week into the Wild. We got Stephen Defer with us, and he's going to be talking about how do we overcome these walls that have been built up in our life? How do we get past them? He's going to let us know how. Hey, we want you to download that Cokesbury app because we're in person. We're in person on North and South campuses, 10 a.m. every single Sunday, and through the app is where you reserve your spot. So make sure you go download that. And we're gonna send it over to Nakaya. She's gonna lead us in a song called Lay It On Down. Let's go, Nakaya.
Presence, I am
Hey Cokesbury, we are so thankful that we are a church of next steps. And one of the next steps that you can take here at our church is by giving. We're doing so many incredible things. We have Christmas Hope that's going on, Manna House, Fig Tree. All these things are becoming so successful because you guys. There are 4 easy ways that you can give here at Cokesbury. You can give online at cokesbury.tv. You can give on the app. You can mail it in, or super simple, you can text to give at the number at the bottom of the screen. Once again, we're so grateful. We couldn't do any of this stuff without you guys. So let's give it over to the band one more time.
Drives away and follows you back home. And I'm a street light shining. I'm a wild light blinding bright, burning off alone. It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again. I'm a brand new sky to hang the stars upon tonight. And I am a little divided. Do I say run away and leave it all behind? It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these you time and time again. Oh, and it's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again. Oh, it's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again. Time again. Time again.
Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Stephen. I'm the senior pastor here at Cokesbury, and if this is your first time with us, I'm really glad that you guys are here. If you're chatting along with us, I want to encourage you to do that. We would love to connect with you any way that we can, because I know that this season we're in can be awkward and it can be really lonely, and I want you to know that our church cares about what's going on in your life, so I hope you'll take advantage of that. We've been in this series called Into the Wild, and today we're going to wrap it up, and I want to start here. It's this basic concept that none of us likes to lose, right? Like we all want to win. And if we're honest with ourselves, lately, a bunch of us, we've faced a lot of losses. We face losses when it comes to the virus, or maybe when it comes to the economy, or I'll just think about our own mental, physical, and spiritual health, and the way that that has just sort of felt like a loss for a lot of us. We're in this phase where we need a victory, and I don't know about you guys, but I'll take one any way I can get it. I don't even care. I'll take it financially, or if it comes relationally, or vocationally, or at school, or athletically, right? I'll take it mentally. I don't care. I just need a victory. In fact, you could just say that out loud right now. It's actually cathartic. I need a victory. We need some wins, right? Because we've had too many losses. And if that's where you find yourself today, you're going to love this message, because we're going to be talking about some biblical principles for how we can all experience victory even when it feels like we're up against the wall. And as tried as this may sound, here's what I actually believe: that even when you hit a wall, God can open a door. I want to say that again. Even when you hit a wall, God can open a door. God can help you win even when you can't see a way. We've all heard that phrase, where there's a will, there is a way, right? But I think a more accurate statement would be, when it's God's will, God will make a way, right? Even when you think you've hit a wall. Over the past few weeks, we've been learning how we navigate this wilderness season that so many of us find ourselves in. We all have them. I mean, there's no point in trying to deny it. There are moments in life where you just sort of feel like you're wandering out in a desert, really kind of unsure of what direction you're supposed to go. And we've been tracking this fascinating story of the Israelites as they navigate their way through the desert, out of captivity in Egypt, as God is leading them toward the promised land. And so we've been finding these moments, right, where their life was sent in a new direction. We started off by talking about how in Exodus 13, we see that there are moments when you find yourself in the wild where there is a lack of direction. How God has a tendency to lead us in a roundabout way. Even in the story, we know there was a direct path to the promised land, but God chose to not take them that route because there were some things they needed to learn, and there were some ways they needed to grow that would better prepare them to claim God's promise in their life. And then we talked about scarcity, how in the wild it can feel like you're running out of resources, how there can be moments where it literally feels like you're running on empty. And we talked about how we've got to get ourselves in a position where we understand that God provides for his people, but he does it one day at a time. It's that desire to try to build a deeper sense of trust in each of us as we navigate our way through the wilderness. And then last week, we talked about how in these moments of crisis, there are these really hard spots that we might find ourselves in. And there may be this tendency to feel like that we're caught in a trap, or we're kind of stuck. And it's at those moments, those really hard moments that feel like a breakdown, that God can actually use to create a breakthrough in our life. And so today I want to wrap this up by talking about what I'm calling untested strategies, right? Sometimes when you're in the wilderness, God will lead you to a wall where you've got to do some things that you never thought you would end up having to do. And it usually starts with this idea of surrender. It starts when you and I learn to fully surrender our life and our will over to God. And that's not always an easy thing to do. In fact, I would argue that the first step toward victory is almost always a step out of your comfort zone. That's what we're going to see in the Israelites' experience. So let me kind of set this thing up. It's been 40 years since they've made their way through the Red Sea, and Pharaoh's army has been defeated once and for all. They've been wandering their way through the wilderness, and they've crossed the Jordan River, and now it's time to actually go into the promised land. And the very first thing they come to in the promised land, like they've made it, they've arrived. It's been 40 long years. It's incredible. It's awesome. They're looking around. They see that maybe this is the place that God had been promising their entire life, and it was as good as God had promised it would be. And as soon as they crossed the Jordan River, they hit a wall. And it's the wall that surrounds the city of Jericho. They had problems in the wild, and as soon as they got to the promised land, they had more problems. That sounds like life, doesn't it? That's what our experience is often like, if we could be honest with ourselves. And just because they had moved into the promised land, they still had to take possession of the promise that God had given them. And it started with the city of Jericho. So here's what we see in Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in, but the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. God had already given them the city of Jericho. It's yours, but the doors are shut tight and the walls were huge. In fact, archaeologists have been digging around the city of Jericho for decades. And what they've discovered is that there wasn't just one wall. Like that first wall was wide enough that you could drive 2 chariots side by side. So this is not like a fence. This is a legit straight up wall. Not only is there one wall, but there was a second smaller wall on the inside of that. So if you made it over the first wall, there would be a gap, and then you'd have to try to make it over a second wall before you could actually make it into the city. The idea is that this was a really big deal. Now, here's what I want you to see. Sometimes God's will includes a wall. We don't like walls very much, do we? Most of the time we're like, God, how can I get over it? Or how can I go around it? Or how can I go under it? But not these walls. There was no way to go over it or under it or around it. See, this is reality. Some of us may feel like right now in this moment, like we've hit a wall. Like 2020 hasn't just been a bad year. It's really wreaked havoc in our lives, and we don't know how to deal with it. Don't know how to go under it, don't know how to go over it. The doors are shut. I don't know how to move forward in my life. I don't even know what to pray for in this season. And if that's you, let me encourage you. The wall cannot keep you from what God has already given you. Think about it for a second. Think about what God's already given you. He's given you his salvation. He's given you his son, Jesus. He's given you hope. He's giving you this, his spirit to guide you. He's given you a family. He's given you a fellowship. He's given you, even as scattered as we are right now, a church community that you can connect with that can help you get from one day to the next. He's working and moving in your life right now. You may be up against a wall, but you are not alone. Our God is present, and listen, he is bigger than any wall that you and I might be facing in this moment. And so here's the question. What do you do when you feel like you're up against a wall? Well, the first principle that we learned from the Israelites when they faced a wall is that you got to look up to God and you got to be humble. I don't know how you respond to authority in your life. But from the time we're little kids, there's a bunch of us who've struggled. Most of us, our first word was not mommy or daddy. It was actually mine, right? You remember those days? Could have been a toy, could have been a blanket, could have been a sippy cup. It's not yours, it's mine. We claim territory. If you're a parent, you've been there. As you mature, you learn not to react. Usually your first response is, well, what did your mom say? Or what did your dad say, right? Our 3 boys figured out how to work the system pretty early on in their young lives. If they were hurt, they went to Beth. If they actually got injured, they would come to me. If maybe they needed some money, they would always come to me. But if they got in trouble, whether it was at school or at a practice or if they're hanging out with their friends, if they got in trouble, they would always go to Beth first. But here's the deal. We have to learn how to navigate authority. It's interesting, in the Israelites' experience, at this point in their story, you've got Joshua, right? Joshua is one of the original spies that Moses sent in to check out the promised land. In fact, he was one of only 2 spies that came back and said, look, I think we can do this. I think God is leading us in there. It's not an impossible situation. All the other spies came back and they're like, there's no way. People are huge. They're well armed. They're a giant army. There's no way we can enter in. And Joshua was one of those people that said, no, I think God's got this. And ironically, because of his belief that God had brought them to the right place, he was the one that God chose to actually lead the Israelite people into the promised land. And here he is now, the leader of a brand new nation. And he's got this city that he knows God has given them, but there's a giant wall that he has to figure out how to get over. So there's all this military strategy stuff going on, right? He's feeling the full weight of the mantle of leadership on his shoulders. By this point in their story, there's about 1 to 3 million Israelites who are counting on Joshua to get them to God's promise. And so as he's navigating all of that, the scriptures tell us that off in the distance, he sees a warrior standing there. Now, we don't know a lot about him, but I would assume this is like a big, bad dude. He sees this warrior and he's not sure what's going on. And so he says to the warrior, like, are you for us or are you for them? And I love this. Joshua 5:14 says, neither one, he replied. I am the commander of the Lord's army. See, God has just shown up in this situation, and we get to see in this moment the very heart of God. We want God to pick sides, don't we? Like, if we could be honest with each other, anytime we're facing a situation, we really do want God to choose sides. But this warrior's saying, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not for either side. I'm the commander of the Lord's army. See, when God shows up, he doesn't come to take sides, he actually comes to take over. Scriptures say at this point, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. I am at your command, Joshua said. What do you want your servant to do? See, Joshua is one of those leaders who not only had authority, but he understood how to be under authority. And when Joshua realized who he was talking to, he fell flat on his face and he humbled himself. He understood that in that moment, his job was not to lead, but to be a servant. See, God's not here to take side. His objective is to take over your heart and my heart, to take over your life and my life. He's not interested in part. It's not like, God, you can have this relationship, but I'm gonna hang on to this relationship. Or God, you can have this part of my life, but I'm gonna kind of protect and hang on to this part of my life. Or you can have this situation, but I'm gonna hang on to these situations because I feel like I can control them better. Now, Joshua humbled himself. He's like, you're in charge. What do you want me, your servant, to do? So maybe a good first step for some of us is to maybe simply acknowledge who's actually in charge. See, here's what I know. Our greatest spiritual victory will often come from our deepest place of surrender. Think about that. Our greatest spiritual victory will often come from our deepest place of surrender. That's what we see Joshua do. He's got all these plans, he's got all these strategies, and he ends up just sort of laying them before God and saying, look, here I am, I'm at your command. Here's what I think I need to do, but you tell me, what do you need me to do? And God, to the best of my ability, I'm gonna do that. See, I think sometimes what we want is we want God to bless what we're already doing. We want him to take sides in our heart. And I think this is a good reminder that while God loves, God is also in charge. Listen, God is bigger than the headlines. God is bigger than your sorrow. God is bigger than your ego. He's bigger than what you're dreaming about. He's bigger than everything that you've been dreading. God is bigger than every single one of your problems and my problems. God's bigger than our talents. He's bigger than all we've done or everything that we hope to do. God is bigger than Apple. He's bigger than Google, Facebook, and Amazon. He is bigger than the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, and the MLB. He's bigger than what you and I have lost. He's bigger than what you fear. He's bigger than what it is that you might be facing. He's bigger than what happened to you in your past. He's even bigger than what's coming. He's bigger than all the lies. He's bigger than the hype, the virus, the economy, the election. Come on, somebody. He's bigger than your past, and he's bigger than your future. Listen, he has the authority over anything that you might be under. He did not come to choose sides. He came to take over because he is God. And so when you and I come up against a wall, when we aren't sure, we got to look up and we've got to acknowledge we are under his authority. We've got to say to ourselves, God, I'm going to look up to you and I'm going to trust you to the best of my ability. I'm not going to be perfect with it, but God, every day I'm going to do my best to just surrender my will over to you and say, God, my life is your life. What do you need me to do? Sometimes you got to look up and you got to be humble. Here's another thought for you if you're facing the wall. Is just simply go with what you know. I don't know about you, but one of the touch points in my life is when I get something and it comes in a box, right? And it's got, the box is stamped with this idea of some assembly required. Like that always throws me in a tailspin. I don't like to follow instructions. Usually what I end up doing is just sort of pouring everything out on the floor and just sort of get after it and figure it out as I go. The problem is, when you don't actually follow the instructions, that's where it can begin to wreak havoc. Sometimes when it comes to the walls in our lives, we wish God would give us some specific assembly instructions, right? Like at least give us a picture or two along the way. God, show us what to do. Do I marry this guy? Do I not marry this girl? Should I take this job? Should I not take this job? Should we move? Should we not move? God, just show up. Give me some clear instructions. What's interesting about this story, the Israelites got some really specific direction from God, but it didn't make it easier. God revealed his will, but it just sort of confused them. And it was confusing because they couldn't see the whole plan. Here's what the direction was. God said, Joshua, I know you've got these plans and I know you've got these strategies, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to get the people and I want you to march around the city one time. In other words, Joshua, I want you to have a parade. And that's all I want you to do on the first day. And then the next day, I want you to get the people and I want you to walk around the city again. Have parade number 2. And then on the third day, I want you to do the exact same thing. And I want you to do that for 6 straight days. And then on the 7th day, I want you to get the people together and walk around the city 7 times. This is where everything changes. I want you to do it in silence. Now, that had to be disconcerting, right? If you're living in the city of Jericho. You've got this double wall deal. You got the doors shut tight. You see 1 to 3 million people who are silently marching 7 times around your city. It's got to be like, what are these people doing? And then at the end of the 7th lap, God tells Joshua, when you hear the ram's horn, I want everybody to shout. And here's what we read in Joshua chapter 6. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horn, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly, the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. Those same archaeologists who determined that there were 2 walls, as they dug a little deeper, they figured out that the walls of Jericho actually collapsed to the outside, which is weird, right? You would think if walls were going to collapse, they would collapse in on themselves. But these 2 walls actually collapsed out so that the people of Israel could literally walk over the rubble and take the city. What this is telling us is that it was God that brought the victory. The Israelites just simply placed their trust in God and surrendered themselves to his will, and God took care of the rest. God brought the victory, and he did it in his way and on his timetable. They got clear direction, but it was still challenging. It still took a step of faith. It's always that way when it comes to navigating the wilderness. It won't be easy. It won't all line up the way you and I think it should line up. There will be moments where the things happen to us that we maybe don't see coming. There'll be moments where you and I really are going to struggle or that we may not understand. There may be moments when we feel completely under-resourced and the challenge may feel too great. And I just want to let you know, it's okay to experience that. This story reminds us that God is with us. It's God who's guiding us. Our God has not fallen asleep at the wheel. God is working and God is moving. God has a plan for your life and my life. There is a strategy, whether we can see it or not, that has been put into play by God. God is big enough to handle whatever it is that we're facing. God's got a timetable, right? God's got a goal in mind, not to harm us, but to bring us prosperity and hope. It's to grow us and to shape us and to ultimately bring us closer to him. So when you find yourself in a wilderness moment, it's the same theme week after week after week. It's asking ourselves, do I have the strength this day to put my trust in him? To control what I can control to influence what I can influence, but ultimately, am I willing to surrender myself, my will, and my life over to God and understand that God's got a plan? That even if I can't see what the future holds, tomorrow can be better than today. To just take that step of faith. See, the wilderness, it's always going to require that you and I step out in faith. I don't know what it is you're facing today. But I would bet as we enter into this holiday season that there's a bunch of us, we're worried about what tomorrow's going to bring. Or maybe we're plagued by our current circumstance. You don't have to be overly smart to look around and realize that the virus is out of control right now. Maybe you've lost your job. Maybe you're trying to figure out, how can I put food on the table for my family? Maybe you're just sort of frustrated, right? Or you're angry, or you sense that maybe you're becoming bitter. In this wilderness season, it feels like it's never going to end. And here's what I know. I know that God understands the frustration. And I know that God is bigger than the fear. And I know that even though you and I may not have all the answers, I know that God's got a plan. And I know that God is working that plan. And I know if you and I can stay faithful and if we can lean into one another, I know that we're going to get through it. Because when you look back over the history of God's people, you just see time and time and time again when God showed up. When God never did leave them alone in the desert. Where God provided for their every need. And where God ultimately brought victory. So what I'm saying to you is this. During this season, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just keep putting your trust in God. Just keep assuming that the best is yet to come. And keep finding ways to engage in what God's doing. You and I have got a wonderful opportunity, no matter where you're watching this from. Whether you're in the city of Knoxville or whether you're on some other part of the country or whether you're listening to this live or where you're plugging in later in the week, all of us, we've got an opportunity right now to make a difference because our world is riddled with fear. Our world is facing unprecedented brokenness, and our world is desperate for this thing called hope. And what if in this wilderness season, God was deciding to use you and to use me to bring hope to somebody else? I hope you guys will have a great week this week. I hope you have a great holiday season. Stay safe, wear your masks. I'll see you next weekend. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
You are good when there's nothing good in me. You are love on display for all to see. You are light when the darkness closes in. You are hope, you have covered all my sins. You are peace when my fear is crippling. You are true, even in my wandering. You are joy, you're the reason that I sing. You are life, in you death is lost its sting. Oh, I'm running to your arms, I'm running to your arms. The riches of your love will always be enough. Nothing compares to your embrace. Light of the world, forever raised. You are more than my words will ever say. You are Lord, all creation will proclaim. You are here, in your presence I'm made whole. You are God, of all else I'm letting go.
my heart will sing. No other name, Jesus.